Hey, how's everyone doing? Jay here with Bikes Kill Cancer. And we're going to talk about how to actually change that flat tube in your bike tire today. And we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty in a minute. Before that, I'm just going to, with no real commentary, just going to change a tire for you real quickly so you can see how quickly the process goes. So here we go. We're done, folks. That is it. Super easy. So now let's dig into the details. And we're going to get a little more into what to look for when you're changing the tire, a couple of pointers, and hopefully you find it useful. Give me a shout, give me a like, give me a comment, let me know what you think of these videos. Alright, so let's dig into the details. We know that we have a flat tire because our tire is all squishy. First thing we want to do is inspect the outside of the tire. So what we're doing is we're just looking for objects that may still be stuck in there that caused our flat. Sometimes they're super obvious, like this safety pin. Believe it or not, I run over safety pins a lot. I cannot tell you how many I have pulled out over the years. But it could also be something as small as like a thorn or a little piece of glass or a little shard of metal. So it's always nice to have a pair of needle nose pliers and sometimes even a pair of tweezers to get those little pieces of metal or thorns out of the tire. This can also be helpful if we have to actually patch the tube and we don't have a good new tube to put in there. We'll have to put a patch on that tube. Knowing where the object went into the tire can help us find the leak in the tube a little bit easier. Next step, we want to take off our valve cover if there's one on there. We also, if we're using a Presta valve, a lot of times it's going to have that valve or the valve nut on there. Just unscrew that, set those aside. If you're doing this trail side, do not leave these on the trail. Put them in your pocket, take them home and dispose of them properly. Nobody wants to see your junk and trash on the side of the road or on the side of the trail. All right, next step. Need to set a tire lever. Sometimes you'll only need one, sometimes you'll need two if it's a really tight fit on the tire. I'll demonstrate how you do that with two. Okay, so we've got two tire levers here, and you can see I can actually pull that tire away from the rim. And if you look right there, you can see the edge of the tire. We call that the bead of the tire, and that's what actually interfaces with the rim to hold it in place when there's air pressure in there in the tube. So first thing we want to do is take one of our levers, wedge it under the bead, and then we're going to put another one right there next to it. We're going to fold the first one back and hook around. It actually has a hook on the back side. Hook it around the spoke, and then we're going to take that other tire lever and just run it along the edge. First tire lever is going to keep the bead from popping back in. Eventually it's going to be loose enough that we can just run the whole thing around to get our tire off. Our tire, or at least half of our tire, is now removed from the rim. Now we can just reach in there, pull this tube out. Old tube. Again, do not leave it trail side or on the side of the road. Take it home with you if you're not doing this in your garage. Last thing I like to do, or the thing I like to do next before putting a new tube in there, is run my fingers around the inside of the tire just looking for any, or feeling for any extra debris that might be lodged in there. Yes, you do run the chance of cutting your finger if it's a sharp object. So if you're not comfortable with that, just use a shop rag and run it in there, and that shop rag will probably just snag on any sharp objects that you have in there. And again, you might have to use a pair of pliers or some tweezers to get out any small bits of metal and glass. Double check to make sure that there's no debris in there. Now I'm going to put a new tube in. But I just want you to see how small that thorn is. It's a battery, a little watch battery in my hand for comparison's sakes. But that little teeny thorn can work its way into your tire, and it almost sort of disappears. They get so small and they'll break off, and you're literally dealing with just the tip of that thing trying to find it. So you really will and really should make sure that you run your hand around the inside of your tire so that you can find those little thorns. All right, got my new tube here. I want to make sure that we take off the valve cap. They usually come packaged with a valve cap and the little valve nut on there as well. Those just thread right off. Hold on to them. We'll use them later on after we get it installed. For a Presta valve, we're going to unscrew that little nut. That opens up the airway. With a Schrader valve, there's nothing to do to put air in there other than to put the pump head on there. Got my pump back here. This is a lot easier if you're using a floor pump, but if you have to use a hand pump, it will do the trick as well. Before I put my tube in, I like to add just a little bit of air to give it a little bit of shape. So we're just going to give this one quick pump. Close the valve up. Got just a little bit of shape. Got my tire here. Little trick, always put your tires on with the logo right by the valve hole in your rim. Just makes it a lot easier to find it. I'm going to insert that valve in there, and then just going to work our tube into the tire. And again, just giving it a little bit of shape allows it to sit in there a little bit easier. We can also put our valve nut on. That will just help. Whoops, let's try that again. Put that valve nut on. Just keeps the Presta valve from sliding back into the rim again. Now, how do we get that back on? Well, this is what sets us apart from the apes, is our thumbs and the ability to change tires. We are just going to pick a spot on the rim and grasp it, push in with our thumbs. We're basically just sort of rolling that bead back over onto the rim. And it's going to get a little tougher and a little tougher and a little tougher, and then eventually you're going to hear it pop right back on there. All right, occasionally you're going to get a tire and wheel interface where this bead just does not want to come back over the edge of that rim. And it is really tempting to take our tire lever and flip it over and try to pry that tire back onto the rim. It may work, but it also is a good chance that you are going to, when you're doing this, you're going to actually pop the tube that you just put in there. And you're not going to know that it happened until you go to inflate your tire and all the air comes rushing back out. So we want to always try use our hands, our thumbs to pop that tube back, or that tire back onto the rim. So now we're going to open up that valve. Got my pump. And I am not going to pump this all the way up, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Let me get a little air in here. So right now I've got about 30 PSIs in a tire that I would normally put 50 to 60 PSIs in. But I just want to inspect, make sure that the rim and the tire have a nice tight seal, nice even seal all the way around. Let me show you what it might look like if it was not seated correctly. So for some reason we did not get that tire seated correctly on the rim, and then started adding air. The tire bead could actually slip off of the sidewall. I'm not sure if you can see that, but you can actually see the tube under there. If I kept adding more and more air, that tube would expand out and eventually pop. We don't want to do that because then we're all the way back at square one. So we want to make sure that is on there. All right. Another trick I like to do sometimes is if the tire is not sitting on there perfectly round, you can add some air and then deflate just a little bit. See how squishy that is? It's like, should feel like bread dough, it's so squishy. And then you just take your hands and flex the tire all the way around, and then go around to the other side and do the same thing. And sometimes that's all it takes is to get that tire to pop into the rim correctly. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and finish airing this one up. I've already looked on the side of my tire, so I know that this one takes anywhere, I think if I remember correctly, like 40 to maybe 70 PSIs. I'm not a super heavy guy, so when I ride these, I ride them anywhere like 50 to 60 PSIs. So there it is. Valve nut, just tighten that up a little bit so it doesn't rattle. We can put our cap back on, that just protects that nipple on the end. Whoops. Let's close that. Then put our valve cap on. That just protects that nipple as well. And folks, that's it. That's changing a tire. Putting a new tube in there, super easy. A couple recommendations. Practice. On a rainy day, take your wheel off your bike and take the tire and tube off. Just practice doing that a couple of times. It will make you a lot more confident when you're on the side of the road and you have to change a flat. Your friends will be impressed with how confident you are there when you're doing it. And the last thing I'd recommend is get a shop apron. You can see this one, it's got some dirt on it already. You can see when I was doing this, I'm putting the tire up against my body. No reason to get yourself all dirty. Shop apron's gonna keep you clean. This one I love, it's from a good buddy of mine, Austin, in Athens, Georgia. His company, he and his wife Lacey run, called Whiskey Stitched. Handmade in the United States. This is wax canvas, so durable, has a little bit of water repellency to it because it is waxed. I'll put a link in the description of the video if you want to go check out their stuff. They do some really cool stuff. And that, folks, is how you change a tire. Hit me up with questions, comments, and likes. Really appreciate it. Take care.